can take as an invitation to come to tell me more and tell the story. Where does your story begin? Maybe your story began just now when you walked in through that door, or this morning when you woke up. But probably your story began much earlier than that. Sorry, I got distracted. If you need to leave, please go through the door and don't feel like you have to stay.
No, it's the door is closed.
No, it's not.
You're not locked in the space. I wanted to caretake her.
No.
Okay. Where does your story begin? Maybe your story began just now when you walked in through that door, or this morning when you woke up. But probably your story began much earlier than that. Maybe your story began with a seemingly inconsequential decision that would go on to determine the rest of your fate and lead to you being the person you are right now, right here in this moment. The decision to turn left instead of right, to look up just when you did, to order strawberry ice cream. You may never know what that decision was. Or maybe your story began the very first time you took agency and decided to do what you wanted to do instead of what you were told. That moment you looked your mother in the eye and put that fistful of dirt in your mouth anyway. Or maybe your story began on the day that you were born, or the day you were conceived, or the day your parents met, or the very first time an ancestor imagined your existence and laughingly joked about a great-great-great-great-great-grandchild from now. Where do stories begin? Does Little Red Riding Hood's story really begin the day she puts on the red cloak and sets out into the woods with a basket full of goodies for Grandma? Did she not wake up that morning or go to bed the night before? When she was a baby, did her grandmother not hold her in her arms for the very first time, forging that bond that would lead to her setting out into the forest on that fateful day? Searching for the beginning of story, we keep uncovering more story. Further and further back in time we go to before we painted on the walls of caves to finally find the first story ever told. And from that story, all other stories would grow. So perhaps what we call your story and my story are not separate stories at all, but rather chapters in the story. And for the story to be complete, your story too must be told. So tell your stories. Tell your stories to your loved ones so they may hold them in their hearts. And tell your stories to strangers, even though they'll probably only remember parts. Tell your stories to the birds so they may sing them in the forest. And tell your stories to the clouds so they may sweep them over mountains and drop them like rain on the plains. Tell your stories to the rivers so they may carry them to the oceans and spread them around the world. Tell your stories so that in a future far from now, a stranger who has never seen your face, nor heard your name, nor visited any of the places where you came, who has never even imagined your existence, will tell a story that holds in its core a kernel of your essence. For within them all stories hold parts of the souls of those by whom they have been told. So hold the stories that you're told. Hold them gently like loved ones. Do not dismiss them with disdain, nor rip them unthinking from their home, nor treat them like objects you can own. No, hold the story that you're told. And like a friend, sit with it by the fire. Walk together through forests and fields and along the shores of lakes. Be curious, inquire, until you know it like you know your oldest friend. And when you know the story through and through, then, and only then, add shapes and colors of your own and let the story go, and be the vessel it has always been, holding within the experience and knowledge of generations that came before, and now also yours. And so stories entwine. And what we call the beginnings of stories are perhaps not so much beginnings, but moments in space and time where we join the story. Just like I join your story now, and you join mine. So, if the beginning of your story is not so easily found, perhaps the question should rather be, where does your story end? And the answer to that is so much easier to give. Your story ends when it is no longer told. So tell your story. Tell your stories. Let them travel with the wind. Let them change in shape and size. Let them free and let them fly. But do not let them die. Tell your stories. Tell my story. Tell our story.